Welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. This podcast is produced by City Current. We're honored to have you join us. You're in for a treat. We have a dynamic duo, two individuals who are coming together to create some pretty amazing artwork, and we get to talk all about that. But we have kind of a two-for-one special, two ChangeMakers as a part of one. Here with us today, we have artist Yancy Villa-Calvo and architect, he's the lead design architect for BRG3S, Jason Jackson. So Jason, Yancy, how are you two doing?
Great. Thank you for having us. We're so excited to share.
So let's start on your end. We're going to dive into each of your worlds personally, and then we'll bring you together and talk about intertwining in this exhibit that you're working on together. And I know that there's even more than that, but let's dive in. Yancy, on your end, give us a little bit of your childhood and where you grew up.
Great. So again, thank you for having us, Jeremy. We're so excited to share today. And I am originally from Mexico City, and that's where I grew up. Then before coming to the States, I lived in Mozambique, and then I arrived to Memphis after that. I came as a student at Christian Brothers University, and and that's where I have my education. I also attended classes at Memphis College of Art, and then, other institutes here and there, classes here and there. So that is my background in terms of education and where I'm from.
So when did art start to enter the equation? When did you start realizing that, hey, this is something that I want to pursue professionally?
That's an interesting question. I always tell my kids that they have to try everything before they realize where they're going to end up. That didn't happen to me, but until my last semester of my undergrad in psychology, where I had to take either a visual art, music, performance, and the only one that fit my schedule was acrylic. And I didn't even know what acrylic meant. And I said, well, if it's my schedule, I'll take it. I took it, and it was like the aha moment. So after that, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Everybody said, of course not. You had to graduate, you had to get your degree. And I listened, I finished undergrad, and then wanted to go into full-time art, and everybody advised me not to. And I listened again to everybody and got my MBA. And then I was working on Masters of Education. And then I said, no, I had to do art. So many years later, I went back to art. But during all of those years, I continued to work on my artwork.
Was there any point growing up when you look back now as a child, like with your family or anything that kind of stood out as, yeah, art was always in me. It just maybe was either kind of pushed to the side by everyone else, or maybe just never had a chance to really come fully out? Was there any moment that kind of stands out to you as a child like that?
And I'm thinking now about my dad. My dad is a petroleum engineer, and I remember his drawings were awesome. I always loved them. So when I had to do any type of drawings, I always went to my dad and I say, hey, can you help me? And he would say, of course not, you have to do it yourself. And I was like, please help me. And of course, he would guide me. But it was, he never touched anything that I did. I mean, he was very particular about me just, coming out with something. And I really enjoyed those moments. I think, just that the world didn't exist around me. So I think that sense of creativity and just making time for that, it really fulfilled me at that time. So I think there was always that part of concentrating on that aspect.
So you're also an entrepreneur, a wife, a mother. So
Yes.
you have many balls in the air that you're juggling. Talk about on your end, your family with Mauricio, your children, just, talk about kind of the other side of just the personal side of Yancy.
First of all, my family is a priority. So I think because of them, that's why I've been able to do what I do. Because first, my husband is super supportive. He was the one actually who encouraged me to leave everything and start into art. uh, it's a long story, but I had some health issues, some paralysis. And then he said, look, you have to love what you do every day, jump. And I was like, oh my gosh, we don't have insurance, we don't have this. And, you know, all of the worries that moms normally have. And he said, we're going to make it, just, you know, things are going to work out. And he allowed me and really encouraged me to jump. And I did. So he has always been there for me in all aspects, but particularly that to make the jump to become an entrepreneur. And then all along, it has been, you know, with my kids and with Mauricio, I drag them everywhere. I mean, I have to do a mural. They help me with the priming. I mean, I have pictures of my kids, you know, like using the electric sander on my paintings, you know, just all in all, because I said, we don't have any family here, and we needed for this to work, we need everybody into it. And so I've been able to figure out how to do my work, but also make it about them and about the community. So I guess all of us are vested in Memphis, and we all bring, you know, a little bit of themselves into my work as well.
So we're going to have some fun and we'll bounce back and forth. One more question for you, and then we'll bounce over to Jason. Give me one either tradition or something that you bring in from your family growing up to your family now.
Food, cooking, everything about celebrating. That's definitely, I don't know if that's a Mexican thing. I think it's so everybody has it, but just spending time making something delicious that we can share, not only, you know, with our family, but with others. So we're always trying to celebrate, invite people over, party here and there, but it's very family oriented. So it's normally, you know, we don't get together just couple nights or just girls nights. I mean, it's always like families where, you know, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of movement, but everybody is in the same space, sharing, you know, intergenerational.
So we'll come back to you and we'll talk all about inspiration for art, but let's switch over to Jason Jackson, as I mentioned before, lead design architect, BRG3S. Jason, give us a little bit of your story in terms of where you grew up and how you got interested in this field of architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually it started with art. Growing up, we were kind of all over the place. I lived in California for a little while. We weren't really stationary. We were kind of looking for different places always. My family was on the move. We were non-traditional in a lot of ways. Bounced around from low-income neighborhood to low-income neighborhood, lived just about everywhere you can imagine. Ultimately, predominantly ended up growing up in Arkansas, top center of the state, Mountain Home, Arkansas. That's where my grandmother lived. And spent formative years there all the way up until I went to college at the University of Arkansas. And I actually started in art there. Art was kind of always a big part of growing up. We had to be pretty creative. I mean, my mother, she was always coming up with unique ways to challenge us, and we did homeschooling a lot, and a lot of our homeschooling was very creative based. And you had to do that when you moved around a lot, you know, just to kind of keep up. And so that was always kind of a big part of my upbringing, art and creativity. And so when I went to the University of Arkansas, that's actually what I started out majoring in, was art education. I wanted to be a teacher, an art teacher actually. And I don't know, something about it. When I got there, it didn't quite fit for some reason. I wasn't sure what it was. And someone told me I should just check out the architecture. I hadn't even really thought about architecture, to tell you the truth, until I went to college and someone said, oh, you need to go check out this program. It's really good. And so I went, and kind of like Yancy's story and her acrylic class, it just sort of, it just fit. I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. It just made sense. And I never looked back.
Talk about on your end professionally, because it is one of those where it's relationships, it's opportunities, it's creativity. There's so many nuances that goes into architecture, especially at the level that you're at. So talk about kind of breaking in and ultimately doing really innovative of saying, hey, I want to bring the company together and find synergy where everyone is playing a part which is a really unique aspect, especially for someone young coming in to try to create that sort of change.
Yeah, I mean, you really got to be, I think you've got to be a little brave in being comfortable with trying something different. Or, you know, there was a really good TEDx, a local TEDx, about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think it has a lot to do with that and challenging other people to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And even in my office, it was kind of the idea, and I think I've been instrumental in bringing this, that we sort of look at our process more important than the project typology. And so it has opened up doors for us to look at a lot of different project types that we traditionally hadn't taken on. Things like the Memphis Slim House, the Memphis Slim Collaboratory, and Memphis 3.0. And that's a really wide range of projects that have a very common thread that have to do with creativity and our process.
Give me one lesson that you learned growing up and, like you said, traveling around, where in a good way, you get to see a lot of different things. You get to experience a lot of different things. You get to experience a lot of different people and cultures and things that I've got to imagine you're able to bring into not only who you are today, but what you're able to create in this field of architecture. So talk about maybe a lesson that you learned growing up that you're able to kind of bring in to what you do today.
Goodness, I mean, ultimately it's the power of creativity to change space, to change our perception of things. I mean, the simplest things you couldn't imagine. I've shared this story before, but it's so powerful to me. It's something that I remember that my mother doing for us. We were living in a church, believe it or not, and there were these really big spaces in there. And I have two sisters, a younger sister and an older sister, and we had one of the rooms, and it was just a huge room, just really odd. Well, my mother, she found these just refrigerator boxes, large refrigerator boxes, and she broke them down, she cut them up, and she stitched them together with yarn, made little doors and roofs, and she put these boxes, each one of us, my sisters and me, we each had our own one, and all of a sudden, in this very kind of cavernous space, we each had our own little space for each of us. And it was that kind of, that's really something that I think has been a powerful thing that I've carried with me all the way up till now. And even my kids have kind of grown up with even creativity here in our house and the power of creativity to change, to make change, and to inspire us and to make situations that maybe seem dire at times much more manageable.
Give me one or two of your favorite questions when you're sitting down with a client or a potential client and you're trying to get inside their head and you're trying to imagine what they see, but then take it to a new level and making sure that you're tying in all the important elements. What are some of your favorite questions to ask?
Yeah, that's a really good one, because you want to get to a lot of times the things that folks are asking at the very beginning when you're getting into a project aren't necessarily the questions that are going to ultimately drive the solution in the end. So that's an excellent question. And how do you get to the real problems? Essentially, how do you ask the right questions to get to the right solutions? Gosh, and I wouldn't say everyone is different. There really isn't sort of boilerplate questions that just, you know, that are the ones that we need to ask that are going to get us to that solution. It has a lot to do with trust, gaining trust at the very beginning to say, hey, you know, we're here working with you and we're going to do this together and we're going to find it out together. And then listening, you know, a lot of it is just listening to them, hearing what, and then using that. And we in our process, a part of our process, you know, we try to, I think, document really well what we're hearing. So that way, when we're iterating and we're going through, it's really easy to kind of lose at times when you're working through the process and you're coming up with a solution, exactly what it was you were exploring in the first place. And so we're constantly checking back to what we're hearing. So that way, when we come to a sort of a crossroads that says, oh, you know what, this isn't really what they were asking for, but we think this is important anyway, we need to explore this, you know, it's not because we are doing it in opposition to what we've heard or but it's because it's something that we're seeing that we think is important. And so, you know, one of the things is just listening and hearing them and then, you know, sort of restating that and saying, hey, this is what we heard. And then another is saying, well, how have we looked at this? Have we tried this? And, you know, having clients that are open to that. So some of it is also having just really great clients and great people to work with.
Well, like you said, it's listening and being in the moment and letting that drive it. But also, too, at your point, the experience of kind of being able to see all the different angles so that, hey, maybe this is a piece that we need to explore that you might have left before if you didn't have that experience of saying, hey, we need to go in this direction and explore it a little bit further. Because in the end, it could create something really special that's a win for everyone.
Well, that was a really important conversation. I'm thinking about Memphis Slim Collaboratory and our community process there, because that was a sensitive project. It was an old house that was Memphis Slim's childhood home, and it was in a really bad state. It was in a tough condition, and ultimately, it really wasn't feasible to renovate it. So the floor was gone, the roof was gone. It wasn't a renovatable project. And so we had to have a really, and it was fascinating. We had to have a lot of conversations with the community on, well, if we're going to rebuild this, what should it be? What should it look like? And that's a really sensitive thing. There's a lot of folks that will probably say, oh, well, this should look like exactly like it was, right? And I think that that's sort of a kind of like knee jerk. That's like, oh, this is what it should be. That just makes sense. But, we worked together, and when we were kind of thinking about it, well, we're adding new space. There's going to be a recording studio. It's really something new. And, so together we kind of all agreed, oh yeah, you know what, this needs to reflect what Memphis Slim's house used to be. But then we all agreed together at the same time that it also needs to reflect this new community-oriented purpose. And, that's something that takes trust and dialogue and communication. And you really need the buy-in of the neighborhood to be able to do things like that.
Yancy, let's bounce it back to you. And a similar question on your end is you're exploring projects, and especially murals and some of the things you've had a chance to work on, these big projects, what are the questions you like to ask? How do you like to start bringing in that input to start creating your creative process?
So I agree with everything that Jason has mentioned. And I think that is definitely also the process for public art. When I'm thinking about a physical space, a lot of the projects already, have that, like, okay, we want a mural here. My process is, it just takes us back a few more steps, like, does the community want a mural there? Is that the best space? So I'm bringing
which that's a good place to start. Just because you want a mural there doesn't mean
exactly.
the community wants a mural there.
Or not everybody in the community, right? Maybe they ask just a particular, like, probably people that are being asked, should we do this here? And they say yes, but like maybe 90% of the people think that it would be better to do benches or to do something else that could be, just have their stories written or told in a different way. So a lot of my work is community engagement. It's absolutely, for the if it's a public, again, and I'll go back to that, if it's a public art, it has to be driven by the community, with, by, and for the community, for it to be successful. Because I can come up with like 800 ideas on, oh my gosh, it will look great here if we do this. I don't live in that community. I don't know the history of that community. So those are super, super important questions. And maybe the work is not gonna, for you, is not gonna look as great as if you added all of your background, but the community will love it and will, treasure it. And that's ultimately what art should do. So, so my work, again, it focuses more on like the previous phases, and the physical part is kind of in the middle. So the beginning is really, what type of work do you want to see? What do you want to highlight? Is it your story? Is it the history of the neighborhood? Is it the collaboration? Is it what you want to be in the future? What is it? So, and then how many people are involved in these conversations? So going into places, instead of saying, hey, we're going to do a workshop here. Now, you have to go to the clinics and the waiting rooms and the restaurants and outside stores and outside parking lots to to really capture those voices of the community who are there and do not have time to go to these meetings that you are proposing. So, like that is really, really, really important. Then, when you're creating the work, if you start including, the youth into it, and perhaps people who are painters in the community, who are sculptors, who are welders, and they're part of the project, and that you are, subcontracting or allowing for mentorship or any type of growth, that also is a very important part of my work. And then finally, like what happens after that? Like if we activate a place or a space, is there a way to continue in this? So we recently did something like that in Orangebound, where the youth were super, super, super involved. And then after that, we're like, okay, so what is it gonna look now? I mean, you guys already work on this mural. So can you think of other places that maybe we can request for walls? Maybe we can request for a space. Can you drive this conversation? Can you, how can we, continue that? And not the artist itself, maybe we can initiate that, but leave a process for them to hopefully get other entrepreneurs or to take on, right? And that's how the communities really, and the art should really work.
I think that's a great lesson and you paint the picture, pun intended, very well, in the sense of how much work it really is. So in other words, it's not, oh, you're commissioning, you just create. It's no, I've got to invest myself and do the due diligence of getting to know the community, getting the input, going where they are, and not just assuming that they're going to come to me. I've got to go to them and make sure that I get their input and their buy-in, and then take it to the next level, like you're talking about, is make sure they're involved in bringing it to life so that they have ownership of it. And then beyond that, how can they help sustain it? Because as you move on to the next project, it becomes a piece of their community that you want them to sustain and have pride in and ownership of, so that it will continue to not only live and be colorful and bright and vibrant, but also to carry forward and create new life. And I think at all of those stages, that means time, effort, energy, work, and strategy. I'm curious on your end. Go ahead.
Let me just interrupt you right there. I missed one very super important part that Jason touched on, which is the trust. So as an artist, you cannot come in and just, pretend that people are gonna share their life story to a stranger. So you have to definitely rely on collaborations and partnerships of the organizations who are doing the work, the grassroots level and the grass tops as well. And really work through all of what exists, and then how can we enhance it? And then another really quick point is to be super intentional about coming in with like your hands are like this. I'm ready to learn. I don't know, and to recognize your weaknesses, to recognize your lack of history or in that place, in that community, and be willing to learn and be willing to work with them to, together start the process. So that the collaborations and partnerships with organizations and other businesses are, super important as well.
Yeah. And I love, like you said, I'm coming in with open arms to learn, and genuinely I'm here to learn and bring all that knowledge in. I'm curious, one more question, then we'll talk about the two of you, kind of where you met and started working together. When you look at your art and you're bringing all these different pieces into the equation, at what point, or even is it a part of it, of what statement do I want to make? What dialogue are we trying to create? What sort of, beyond the physical aesthetic and the piece of art, what conversation is it going to really spark to create some positive change? Where does that enter the equation?
Yeah, so, again, art it can take many forms, right? From a performance to ephemeral art to temporary, to permanent, to system. So it's a little bit, all over. But I guess in terms of art and, let's say, activating community development or socially engaged art, where I'm always thinking, what is my work gonna establish? Is my goal is to establish a conversation, or is it a call to action? So that I always have to have at the beginning to know exactly how I'm going to approach the project, because everything is different. So, like, for instance, I'll bring an example really quick. So when I did an art installation at the University of Memphis at the museum, I was super intentional about creating a call to action. So it was like, it was when the immigration detention centers started, being super imposed in the border, at the border. And I approached the University of Memphis and said, hey, can we do this? And they were like, yes, let's go for it. And I was like, hey, okay. So we created a replica inside the museum of an immigration detention center. And the idea was, how, like, to put pictures of the whole community around, and then how, like, these lights inside this cage could reflect toward outside, and the chain link is really on the viewer, on the participant, and even in the photographs of the community. And then adding the opera, the collaboration with the opera Memphis, where we got a piano inside the cage, and the opera singers were singing arias about family and family separation. So it was super powerful. It was, again, ephemeral because it went, but the point here was, like, whoever participated, the idea was like, okay, I mean, could you feel what people are feeling right now? What can you do? So we also partner with Latino Memphis to say, okay, you need to vote for people who are, who are just, and who you want to have them as leaders of the community to change at the systemic level. So we had voter registration tables with people, obviously, who do this officially. And so that was the call to action. So the art was just a means to get people to understand what's happening, and, like, okay, this is what you can do, and give them an option on, like, this is how you can contribute or donate to organizations who are doing the work. You can vote, unless that's the most powerful thing that you have. So that was ultimately what the purpose was.
I've got to believe that I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. And when you look at getting your degree in, like, psychology, there's so much of that plays into everything that you're talking about. So I think there's a reason why your path has been created in this, where you can tie all these really unique elements together, but then dive into the psychological difference you want to make as well with the art. Let's switch it over to you, Jason, and share from your vantage point. We'll let Yancy kind of poke some holes in it if you want, but share how you two met and started to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mentioned Memphis Lynn House, and that's actually probably the project that set me on the path, which I didn't know at the time, to culminating in this collaboration with Yancy, because that led to a larger visioning of the Soulsville area. So, and using that, the whole process to Soulsville was really looking at using art as a way to create neighborhood revitalization, positive change in the area. And so that larger visioning, essentially, long story short, led to VRG3S working with the city on the Memphis 3.0 planning efforts. And it was really interesting because we had a section, there were multiple architectural teams, because this was a huge project. This is 14 districts all across the city, one of the largest initiatives. In fact, it might be the largest master planning initiative that's ever been undertaken. Somebody can fact check me on that, but I think it is. And so it's this immense scaled project that actually I think has won some awards recently. And luckily enough, Yancy was in our core group, was involved in our district. So there were multiple artists that were involved in this planning exercise. And so this was my actual first engagement with Yancy's art, which immediately I think we were all drawn to, and it became such a useful tool to engage the community. And that's something that really fascinates me about Yancy's art, because like she was talking, it doesn't just stop at this sort of physical, beautiful, object. It's really a useful tool. And in this case, it was really to engage the community, the neighborhood, the residents in a very tactful way. So they have it's the Memphis gems, and they would use these gems to kind of locate themselves in this collage of Memphis that, kids had fun, parents had fun. Immediately when people came in, they were thinking of this master planning exercise in a very different way that allowed them to sort of take control and take ownership and be an active participant in it. That, compared to other meetings I had been in, it really made the dynamic much more relaxed, very fun. And, they were beautiful. They were artifacts or things that people could take home that really made them, think about it beyond just that meeting, that it was something that was, bigger than just this one meeting and hearing their input and then it's done. And so we were able to work on just a series of community meetings throughout a 1.5-year process in which we were using art to engage the community.
And so carry that forward to Intertwined, and I'll just kind of toss it up to either one of you to describe the process, because it's a big honor to be chosen. It's also a very large architectural exhibit at the same time. So it's a big honor and it's a big masterpiece that makes a statement. And it's really powerful to know that, so this will be displayed at Memphis International Airport at MEM, but it's also too, having local artists. This is a big deal, having local artists to win this honor, and also to be able to install this is a really cool storyline in and of itself. So for either one of you, describe Intertwined.
So I can tell you, I can take you from the beginning, and then I'll let Jason talk about like the rest. The pandemic was or has been a blessing in many sense. This because of the abrupt interruption on everything about community engagement. Everything ended. You cannot talk to anybody, you cannot do anything. So it really prompted me to have this question like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Come up with creative ways, just don't stay still, look for something. And I came across this and I, again, thinking that, yes, I'm an artist. I've never done this, but I want to do it, but I need to bring the best of the best with me, because that's how we can, make something awesome. So that's when I said, oh my gosh, BRD3S, I've worked with them. We've worked for, a long time in a different capacity. And I brought it to Jason. It's like, hey, there is this opportunity. Do you want to collaborate? And he said, yes. I'm like, okay, great. So many hours, we were counting more than 700 hours plus to come up with this design. But the idea or the inspiration was very centered around Memphis. We were competing with national teams. And of course, these teams have, Seattle, San Francisco Airport, Houston, you name it. They're awesome. I follow them. I follow these artists. I think they're absolutely incredible. And then when they were finalists, I was freaking out. I was like, oh my gosh, we're competing with them. But I knew that we had to work really hard, and we have it. That's why we were competing, right? Just to keep that in mind. And so the inspiration was really based about Memphis. We wanted to bring the multicultural aspect of it. We wanted, being an immigrant, and now I'm a US citizen, but then having so much of Memphis being very diverse, very inclusive. How can we put all of these things together in a, you know, in a piece of art that it will be hanging for international visitors to come as well. So it was like many things. So I thought, you know, I thought about a weaving loom. And why? Because it talked about, you know, it was about fabric, about yarn, about color, about bringing all of these different components together. You know, it just reminded me of the softness of, you know, material, and it's cross-cultural, right? It's international, and it has been existing for, you know, 100,000 of years. And so how can people relate to it? And that's when, you know, I said, okay, this is a weaving loom. That's what I've been thinking. And then I proposed it to Jason, and then Jason started working his magic, because mine was like super, you know, not ethnic, but, you know, very geometric, and these forms are like super colorful and like, oh my gosh. And it needed to be, you know, for an international airport. So, you know, 100 iterations, I don't know how many we did, but went back and forth, like, what about this? What about this? And tons of ideas. So I'll let Jason continue the process.
Yeah, so take it from there, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically, I mean, we had a lot of technical issues with the iteration as well. You know, it's a pretty small window of about 5 feet, over 240 feet, with this really cool new undulating ceiling that's being constructed into the Concourse B. So there were a lot of technical issues that we knew we were going to be challenged with when trying to create this very sculptural weaving loom idea. So that was a big part of the challenge.
It's hanging from the ceiling, correct?
Well, hanging from structure above the ceiling.
Right,
but yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's this giant thing that's kind of floating above folks' heads. So we had to tackle issues, you know, it was really easy to get inspired by this idea, this multicultural fabric. It had so many layers of history that were kind of woven into it, pun intended, with Egyptian cultures and kind of Memphis past and the colorful and geometric patterns. So that was really easy to get excited about. The challenge was, well, this has to be light and airy and dynamic and engage people from multiple views and cover all this space. So like Yancy said, you know, it took a lot of tries and iterating and discovering new tools, new modeling tools. So we're kind of sculpting this thing in a digital model, and then we're using virtual walkthroughs to kind of test it out and make sure that it's working. And so yeah, it was a pretty immense challenge to do in a pretty short amount of time to compete with these guys on an international level. But the funny thing is, you know, I feel like Memphis is right there. I think we're leading the charge in so many things right now. I think about the George Floyd protests and how Memphis handled that stuff, and really just, I think, leading, even with the pandemic stuff. And I feel like, you know, we may not get it right, but there's no one else is getting it right either. And I feel like we're doing a pretty darn good job at leading the charge here right in Memphis. And so why shouldn't we be the ones, you know, to have these opportunities now?
And I think it does make a statement that a local artist competing against national, which Yancy, like you said, these are people who you admire and look up to, and to know that you're able to not only put together something world class, but to win the opportunity to do it. It's got to be a great feeling. But I love it as a Memphis storyline. It's a great storyline that, you know, like Jason says, why not Memphis? We should be leading.
Yeah, and we want to, you know, that's part of our commitment to Memphis, to invest in the local economy, to be intentional about requiring our suppliers to, you know, have a $15 minimum wage across the ladder to break the poverty cycle. We want hopefully small minority women-owned enterprises, and really to elevate our community. So because Memphis is we are very passionate of Memphis. I mean, that's why we're here. We're super passionate, and also to talk about what Jason mentioned. Towards the end, that's when the George Floyd murder happened. My family and I went to one of the protests, and when we were there, one of the guys talked about interwoven. They talked about interwoven and how our races, our religions are, we're interwoven in Memphis. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we're trying to do, as, creating a piece of art, but, hopefully through color, through shapes, through directions, you are being part of this in an abstract way that, we are intertwining this together and just making Memphis move forward.
Talk about how long it takes to ultimately get to the point of, okay, you're selected, but then ultimately to where we'll be able to actually see it. So what does that look like?
Jason?
Yeah, so it's a pretty long process. I guess we're going to kick off production in later this year. So we've got a bit of a design phase to go through right now that, we've got sort of a concept and now we'll have to go through schematic design. So we're iterating on the connections, the technical aspects, coordinating with the construction crew on site. Some of the things we were talking about today is this needs to be a white glove install. So if there's other construction things happening, coordinating with those guys to make sure that there aren't any issues there, coordinating with the ceiling, the new ceiling that's in there, because those guys are going to be really protective of their ceiling. So we've got to make sure we're respectful to that and make sure it works. So really right now, we've got a process of making sure that everything works and is going to work well and that we can execute on a world-class piece of art. And then comes the actual installation of it. So once we've got all those pieces, we've got them all boxed up, now we're ready to go through the install process. And then finally come to the installation being complete. Yancy, remind me on our schedule, when's our deadline for the
March 1st.
March 1st,
yeah,
okay.
it's April.
I thought it was April, but
April
okay.
is when the airport is supposed to open. So yeah, and adding to Jason, part of this, I know that we're super thankful to winning this project, but it was a huge effort of many people. It was not only Jason and I and the rest of the team of ERG3S. I mean, we asked so many friends and colleagues. We asked David French and his team, Memphis Brand Initiative, to revise our description, to elevate those, because we were the Memphis team. We wanted Memphis to win. So we asked everybody that we knew, like, hey, can you see through our presentation? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? So it was a huge effort for many people, and we're very thankful for all of them.
So let's switch over. We're going to do a lightning round. So just quick questions and quick answers by you two, just a fun chance to wrap up, and then we'll wrap up officially with contact information. But what do each of you like to do to relax?
Jason?
Josh, just spend time with the family. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of a movie buff. We like Netflix, like anyone, hanging out together, playing, just most of the time it's just family time.
Yancy, what about you? What do you like to do to relax?
Well, it's a different question in the pandemic. Now, what we enjoy very much is going to the lake and to Shelby Farms and do the stand-up board paddles and to be laying down and my husband paddling. That's what I enjoy the most.
Give me a favorite saying or quote or something that inspires you. So Jason, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I guess I use this one from Steve Jobs a lot, that basically I'll kind of summarize it, that once you realize you can push on the world and make a difference, that you basically, your outlook completely changes. Once you realize that people no smarter than you have done everything that you see around you, that's pretty empowering. And that's something that I think has kind of always stuck with me.
Yeah, nice. Yancy, what about you?
So we have it written in our kitchen, and it is a quote from Loyola, Ignatius of Loyola, that says, "In everything that you do, serve and love."
What's a favorite restaurant or place to eat here in Memphis? Jason.
That's easy. Majestic, hands down, my favorite restaurant.
Nice. Yancy, what about you? And you can't say you're home because I'm sure the home cooking.
Yeah,
That's what you do, isn't it?
Mauricio cooks awesome. No, I do. But if I had to go out, many restaurants, love Memphis restaurants, but my favorite is Crazy Noodle.
Nice. Unexpected. That was good. All right. Give me a favorite vacation spot, Jason.
Gosh, this is kind of embarrassing, but we love Disney World. That's
Nothing embarrassing about that. That's
it's
good.
a great time. Everything's there. We just, yeah, we love Disney World.
Yancy, what about you?
So I would, we travel a lot, and I guess if I had to go back to a place that I thought was mesmerizing is Tbilisi.
Give me one thing that you learned from your parents. And once again, it can be a quote, a saying, a lesson, whatever, but something you've taken from your parents.
Jason?
Work hard. Yeah.
I was about to say the same. Just, be honest.
Work ethic.
And yeah, work very hard.
Give me we'll kind of leave it open, a book or a movie or a show, something recently that you've watched or read.
I have children, teenagers, the self-driven child.
Nice. Jason, what about you?
Gosh,
Unfortunately, none of us are watching sports right now, so it's one of
we've been just a lot of kids, with being at home with the kids 24/7, we're watching a lot of kid shows right now. It all kind of runs together, to tell you the truth.
I completely understand. That's usually where you can figure out like the age groups, because it's like, whether it's cartoons or action movies or Avengers and X-Men. So I feel the pain. I understand completely.
We just got the Disney Plus membership, so that's given us some new content that we're excited about.
So what do you hope that people experience, walk away feeling with Intertwined?
Well, that's easy. Our goal is for anybody who goes, who is leaving Memphis or arriving into Memphis to feel part of our story.
Jason, what would you add to that?
When they come off, especially folks that are coming to Memphis, maybe even for the first time, when they come into that, they get off the plane and they come in there. I just want them to feel like, wow, this is amazing. What a great place. And they're already excited about coming to Memphis, or even leaving Memphis. You're here and you go through and you just feel like, wow, what a great place.
With that being said, so for anyone who's hopefully once things normalize, for those who are coming to Memphis, you mentioned Shelby Farms, Yancy, but give me one more thing, one more place, one more experience. If you have out-of-town visitors, where do you like to take them?
I always take them to Overton Park and Shelby Farms. Besides, the barbecue and the rest. I mean, it's really nature. We take them to parks, downtown. I would say those. Jason,
what about you?
Yeah, a couple of our favorite hotspots are the zoo, the Memphis Zoo, obviously pre-pandemic stuff, and Overton Square, that kind of area right there, Midtown, just so great.
And then many, many, many years from now, from a legacy standpoint, what do you hope people say about you and your efforts here in Memphis and your efforts in terms of making a difference in the world? This is the deep philosophical question.
Oh my gosh, yes, yeah.
Gosh.
I would, I would just say that, like through art, she was able to lift us all.
Jason, what would you add to that?
I mean, if I could make a difference for the positive in everything that I do, if they look and, that made a positive impact, that would be all that I could ask, I think.
Well, the last question is the easy one, is where do we go to learn more? So for each of you, talk about website, social media. Where would you direct everyone to go and follow your efforts? So Yancy, let's start with you.
I have a website, is Yancy, my name, YANCY, art.com. And then also I'm in Facebook and social and Instagram as Yancy Art. So yeah, pretty easy.
And then Jason, what about you?
Yeah, you can find us on our website, brg3s.com. But to keep up with our most recent stuff, I would follow us on our social media, Facebook and Instagram. BRG3S on Facebook and BRG3S on Instagram.
Well, Jason, Yancy, you two are change makers. Thank you so much for all you do, for giving back to the Mid-South. Congratulations on Intertwined. We're all looking forward to seeing it come to life. It's going to be amazing for our city, and so happy that it has a local Memphis storyline. So thank you for both of you for all you do and for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Take care.